Let's get to Auston Matthews. He is in Germany to see a doctor for treatment on an undisclosed injury. He's been out of the lineup for the last handful of games. It has been his preference to go to Germany to meet with a doctor. Again, his preference. You've been on top of this story. If I'm a Leafs fan, I know I'm very concerned about my top player going overseas to deal with an injury that I'm not even completely sure of. What's the latest with Auston Matthews and this injury? Why is he going to Germany? What can you put some sense into this?
Well, he remains in Munich now as we're recording, and he's getting a series of treatments there from a doctor that he saw over the summer as well. And obviously in a case like this, I mean, Auston Matthews is a world-class athlete, and his body is an important part of who he is and what he does professionally. And I think the Leafs are more than happy if this was his preference for how he wanted to sort of take the next stage of dealing with this injury, to have to take part in this. Obviously, they have their team doctor Noah Foreman with them in Germany, and you should definitely be concerned. Don't get me wrong, if you're a fan, just in the sense that this started off as something that really did look and feel like it was going to be. He needs a couple days to let his body heal, and then he'll be back in the lineup. Now you're at 7 games missed and counting after he missed the Wednesday game against Vegas. So, he's not going to play Sunday against Utah unless there's some kind of miracle. So that's at least 8 games. There's a chance he plays next Wednesday against Florida, but if not that game, that's 9 games. To miss 9 games of a season for one absence that was described initially as day to day, that tells you it's not nothing, right? And, my sense though is the Leafs really want him to do what it takes to put the issue fully behind him. I think that he was not right at any point this season. He suffered some kind of setback or injury during training camp. He left practice one day abruptly, missed an exhibition game he was supposed to play, missed a couple practices, managed to start the season. I think he felt was probably putting some pressure on himself, quite honestly. It's his first season as captain of the team. You got a new head coach. Like, obviously you don't want to start the year not playing. And so he tried to tough it out. And, the results show that he was not his dominant self. Still put up decent totals, but nothing like what you're accustomed to seeing. And then eventually got to the point it's untenable. They tried the sort of rest recovery in Toronto. That wasn't improving enough. And, this was the next level that Auston and his team wanted to take things. And so, the Germany thing is interesting. Like, all kinds of athletes from all over the world go to Germany to get treated. I think that it's known for sort of cutting edge medicine there. And as I mentioned, that there's some comfort, having worked with the medical team there previously. And so, I don't know how much to read into that. Sometimes there's a specialist in Denver everybody sees. There's Dr. Sue is doing a lot of the hip surgeries these days out of New York. So if you play in San Jose, say, and you get the hip injury, they send you from San Jose to New York to see that doctor. It's an only slightly longer flight from Toronto to Munich. But it's still, I'm not dismissing it as nothing, but I guess my point is you obviously want to see the top people in the medical field when you're these athletes. And so, it's tough to know what happens next year. I think what's important though to underline, Matthews felt like this was the right thing for him. This is what he was comfortable doing, and the Leafs supported it. And so we'll see where he's at, if he's back this weekend, if he's skating. The biggest concern I would have now is just, is how much time he's been off the ice, what that return to play process looks like. But at the end of the day, do these games in November even matter if we're following the Leafs? We know this is all about making sure Auston can do what he needs to do to be as healthy as he can for the Leafs to have a successful run through the second half of the playoffs. I can't sit here and say that's going to happen, but that's the main thing that's going on here is the Leafs are trying to, and he is trying to get to a spot where he's going to be in peak physical condition at the end of the season, not in the second month of the season.
Another positive to this is just treatment and not surgery. The Leafs also emphasize that as well.
Yeah. And, we're in a new age too. It's it's kind of, I'm thinking of this because Jack Eichel was in Toronto on Wednesday. Obviously, he notably, butt heads with the Sabres over what kind of neck surgery he was going to get years ago. It ultimately prompted the trade to Vegas. That's worked out pretty well for the Golden Knights and for Jack Eichel. But this is nowhere near that kind of thing because, as I say, I don't think this is an adversarial situation between the Leafs and Matthews. But athletes are doing what they feel they need to do. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, if you follow the NFL, he spent time in Germany, amongst other places, while dealing with the tendonitis he had. He also came out and spoke recently in the press and said that he felt like there's a lot of Instagram doctors out there telling him what to do. And he was sort of chastising people for that. I mean, that's why I have a hard time sitting here and second guessing anything. I think, the hard part about covering the Matthews story is there's just been kind of a cone of silence around things. There hasn't been, from a public perspective, it's hard to know what to read into everything. I will say from my private conversations with people all around this situation, I don't get the sense anyone really is freaking out just yet, but you can't get around the facts. The facts are that he hasn't played since November 5th, I believe, or November 3rd. Anyway, early November. And, it hasn't gotten better to where he's even practicing with the team right now. So, that in itself tells you something. And the fact that they've taken this break in the schedule and gone over to Munich also tells you another thing.
And on top of that, I mean, it's not as if Auston Matthews is the only player of note injured on this Toronto Maple Leafs team. I mean, Max Domi wasn't available on Wednesday night. There was news about Kalle Yarncroke being out month to month, but Max Pacioretty being on injured reserve. David Kampf too on LTIR. This is a team of walking wounded right now.
Yeah, I guess the positive side of that is you're getting to see some of the younger prospects and, testing the depth a little bit. The Leafs have been winning too. That's the other thing is some of the urgency is down. Like the temperature is a bit down that they've played as well as they have without Matthews. But you're right. I mean, the injuries are piling up here. I think it's a reminder too that, when we talk about the Leafs, when it gets to the trade deadline time, like I'm reasonably certain, unless there's some huge change in status somewhere else on the roster, that they're going to be targeting at least another center, if not multiple forwards potentially. And so this kind of reminds you, how quickly you suffer a couple injuries and obviously a big one with Matthews being gone for this long. But, you're getting a lot of players in that forward lineup that you just can't count on to score. I mean, it's nothing against those players. It's just, that's not what they're paid to do. It's not what they're expected to do, but they're all having to play a little higher up the lineup or play more minutes than they're accustomed to. And so, I think the Leafs do have reasonably good depth. Certainly they're finding their way through all this injury trouble so far. It's so good. But, if you got trades in your mind, start looking around at some of the available forwards, because I can tell you the Leafs are already thinking about where they might go and how they might use the assets they have as we get closer to the deadline.
If there's one thing we love talking about at the SDPN, it's trades. You said a very magic word, CJ.
Trades. I mean, we don't have a lot of trades just yet, but it is of people's minds now. I mean, it's as far out as we are from the trade deadline, as speculative as something like the trade board is, in the sense that we really don't know yet what teams will be sellers 100%. I mean, we can pinpoint, call it 5 that are very, very, very likely to be sellers. But, teams are already doing this exercise internally with their scouts, looking at who might be available so that they're ready to pounce when we get into the new year.
Okay. But can we go out to Vancouver and discuss this JT Miller story? He is away from the team due to personal reasons. Here's a quote from General Manager Patrick Allvin. Right now, our sole focus is making sure JT knows the entire organization is here to support him. Out of respect to JT, we will have no further comment at this time. What do you know about that situation and what JT Miller's season's been like to this point?
Yeah, it's been a tough season. And, I don't think physically he's been where he needs to be. And, he's pushed through it as a lot of athletes in this sport do, as even I just was saying, Auston Matthews did until he couldn't. And I think JT's been in that spot and with some of those physical limitations and the struggles that have, maybe been attached to them, there's a mental side of it too. There's a toll that's taken on him. And what about JT Miller, I mean, he's a passionate guy. Like, he does not hide his emotions. You know what he's feeling at any given time. He's putting a ton of pressure on himself. And, I think that as those things are sort of building up here, the team and the people that care about him, have really worked together to try to figure out a solution. And what they landed on is just giving him what's being called a reset. Essentially this leave of absence, a little bit of time away to let things calm down a bit. Obviously, he can use that time to heal his body and his mind. And what's good about that is, it doesn't sound like it's anything they expect to be crazy long term. The Canucks are heading out on a 6-game road trip that takes them through the East. I think after that point, this probably, if everything goes well, you'll be looking at Miller, trying to rejoin the team then. So, let's call this probably a proactive decision. Maybe in 10 years ago, NHL, it's impossible to know, but player in this situation might not have got to this sort of solution. But, I really do sense that the Canucks and JT's team here are on the same page, and they're just giving him a little bit of a timeout to catch his breath and make sure he can be at his best, for the key part of their season.